Now, open your Bibles to Revelation chapter 6. Tonight, I am going to introduce you to the second seal. Starting with verse 3 and moving to verse 4. We'll probably be on this verse for at least 2 or 3 messages. And tonight, just an introduction of these verses. Verse 3 reads, Revelation chapter 6, verse 3. And when he had opened the second seal, it's not a second, and if you listen to the beginning of this part of the Last Day series where I first introduced the 7 seals, I believe it was the very first message or second message now, that I described what the scroll was like. So go back and review it for more details. I'm going to quickly just summarize what I said. It's not like you had one seal it was a separate scroll all by itself, and then the second seal was all by itself, a different scroll, and so forth for the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. No, it was one scroll, and as you open the scroll, you come across the first seal. And then as you continue to open the scroll, or the scroll this way, you would come across the second seal eventually. And that's the way for each seal it would take place. It's not like there's one scroll, one seal. It's a whole different situation all by itself, never to be duplicated again. Yes, the events of what that seal is describing to us will not be duplicated again, but it's a continuous scroll. It's not a separate scroll. It means these events will happen first, followed by these events, followed by the next event, and so forth. In alignment through history, through time, with no interruptions. For more details in the description, what I just said in a very quick summary, go to those early messages. And when he opened the second seal, I heard the second beast. Beast there is just like the beast or the 4 beasts in verse 1. A better translation would be living things. And when he opened the second seal, I heard the second living thing say, "Come and see." And there went out another horse. Circle the word horse there. Red. Circle the word red in that verse. And power. That power is added by the translators. It should read, and there went out another horse, red, and was given to him. To who? The rider of that horse. Who is that? So we have to take a look at that. We already know who the rider was in the first seal. Is it the same rider, or is it a different rider now in the second seal? That sat thereon, for what purpose? To take peace. We'll look at that. Circle that. So in this verse, you'd be circling horse, red, him, to take peace from the earth. And by the way, earth there is, you're thinking like it's the whole planet. Even though that eventually would happen, and we're experiencing that in today's world, that's not what that means there. This word earth, translated by the King James people, has really many different definitions for the Greek word. I like region. To take peace from the region. Remember, who is being described here? Obviously, characters, that fall under the seventh and eighth beast in these seals. But who is the main focus in these verses? What nation? Israel. Jerusalem. So to take peace from the earth, even though we know that's what the eighth beast, seventh and eighth beast is trying to accomplish, still today, the seventh beast tried to conquer the then known world so they could have world domination and everyone bowed down to Allah. And the eighth beast hasn't changed his objectives. It too wants the whole world to bow down to Allah. So, in a sense, I really don't have the problem with earth as the word here being used to describe the location of where this is to take place. But to be more specific, because we have to tie in Matthew 24. You remember we looked at that in the beginning messages of this teachings on the seven seals? We went to Matthew chapter 24. Go there real quick. Starting with verse 1. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. That's exactly what happened. And he sat upon the Mount of Olives. The disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? And then Jesus goes into describing all the events that would happen, which if you take the seven seals and line it up with those events, which we did, to see the comparison, this is what Jesus was referring to, which we now know as the seven seals. Jesus looking forward, the seven seals looking forward also from its time that it was given to John to relay the message to the churches. And Jesus said unto them, Take heed. In verse 4, literally, beware. The Greek even goes further. Don't be blinded. Perceive. With your mindset, what you're being told, that no man deceive you. Which means that there's going to be plenty that come on the scene that give you different interpretations of what Jesus meant. We now know, what he meant. Looking at Matthew 24 and Revelation chapter 6 at the different seals and lining up and comparing them, we know that both were related to each other. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ. Literally, I am the Messiah. Or I have the Messianic message that you need to listen to, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars, and rumor of wars. And that's where we're at in this second seal in the book of Revelation chapter 6. Literally it should read, And ye shall hear of warfare and rumors of warfare. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation, ethnos is in the Greek again. Ethnos is one of those Greek words that carry different definitions. All depends upon the context. How to apply the right meaning according to the context. For nation, literally foreigners. Foreigners concerning who? Foreigners concerning whom Jesus was referring to, the nation of Israel. Not the people living in Israel, but the surrounding nations. I mean, ethnos could easily be translated a body of people with common descent or common culture. It could read, for a body of people with common descent or common culture shall rise against another nation, other people, other body of people with common descent or common culture. That's exactly what you see in the Islamic world, by the way. Yes, you could apply this in a general sense, though. Well, different nations from around the world have fought each other. Take World War I, take World War II, take the United States in the Vietnam War, or all different kind of wars that Europe had. A body of people with common descent or common culture. Europe was, if you really think about it, big in that. They will have civil wars within their own nations. We had a civil war within our own nation back in the mid-1800s. We were a body of people with common descent or common culture, fighting a war in our own country against each other. But what Jesus is saying here, for these foreign body of people with their common descent or common culture will rise up against the same kind of body of people that have the same kind of descent and kind of culture that they both share. And kingdom against kingdom. And there should be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in many places, which I'm not going to get into yet. Now, go back to Revelation. And there went out another horse. And by the way, all horses, and every seal here that has a horse. Remember what I said? It seems like months ago now, it probably was, when I first started on this series. I can't believe it that I've been on this series for 8 years already. It seems hard to even imagine that I've been preaching on the last days for 8 years. Think I could finish it in 10? No, I'm only joking there. I'm not serious. There's no way I could do it. But anyway, back to the point here. And there was another horse that went out. Another war horses. As I already taught on, all these horses here in these seals are war horses. And I gave the reasons why. I'm not going to repeat myself. Go back and listen to those messages when they're available. I think some of them are already available to listen to in the archives. And there went another horse, red. Why red? We'll get to that. Was given to him. Who's that him? That sat thereon. To take peace from the earth. Or I believe, from the region. You can apply earth. I have no problem with that. But more specific, according to whom the book of Revelation is addressed to, it was a regional address at the time. And there was given unto him, and there that they should kill one another. I'll get to that. Circle that. Shall kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. Now, even though all these different seals that have a horse in it are war horses, so every seal that has a war horse in it concerns itself with war. But here, in this verse, it focuses in on nothing but war and what war brings about. The first seal introduces us to Mohammed and what he brought on the scene and he went forth conquering and to conquer. But the second seal kicks it up in hyperdrive and spread the war-like nature of this beast much further than Muhammad ever did. Now, I just want to read you something before we go any further. A little interesting little article. At least I think it's interesting. The God of War. On August 13th, 1521, Hernando Cortes overthrew the Aztec Empire. This led to the speedy demise of Huitzilopochtli. Now, that is a tongue twister. It's spelled Huitzilopostli. I had to look it up. I couldn't figure out how to pronounce this if my life depended upon it. So I looked it up. It's Huitzilopochtli. It doesn't even sound like it, how it's spelled in some cases, but Huitzilopochtli, the most important god of the Aztec pantheon. Huitzilopochtli was the national god of the Aztec, as well as their god of war. And why am I reading this? Because the point I'm going to make in this second seal is Allah is the false god of war. Huitzilopochtli was the national god of the Aztec as well as their god of war. He demanded human blood. On festival days, victims would have their hearts ripped out, offered to the sun. Huitzilopochtli was also the sun god, and thrown into the fire. The body would be thrown down steep steps of the temple, flayed, carved up, and eaten. Gross. Horrible. The skin would be used as a shirt in the religious festivities. The Aztecs believed that without human sacrifices to their gods, the world might come to an end, or that their crops would fail. This belief created a big demand in human sacrifices and kept the Aztec state perpetually at war with its neighbors. Prisoners of war and criminals were constantly needed for sacrifices. Thus, the religion is a religion of war because their religious beliefs compel them to wage war. It is fortunate for the world that Cortes and the Spaniards were not tolerant, multiculturalists, and more relativists. Otherwise, in the name of religious tolerance, the Aztec god would still be worshipped today. Instead, Cortes ordered their temples to be converted into churches. Those who resisted were dwelt in the familiar 16th century way. They were killed. If Aztec gods had survived to this day, what would the multiculturalists say? I think they might say something like this. Quote, "You may not agree with the quaint Aztec custom of human sacrifice and the wearing of human skins, but we must not judge them. Remember, what seems bad to you is good to others. Instead, let us enjoy mankind's rich tapestries of different cultures and religions. Oh, by the way, if you happen to visit Mexico City on their festival days, be sure to wear a suit of armor. You don't want to lose your skin. Wallet." Now, and that's end of quote. I think that modern Americans should be grateful that the 16th century Spaniards were intolerant people. They were intolerant because they were confident that their culture and religion were superior to that of the Aztecs. Otherwise, modern Americans would be having far more trouble with their illegal Mexican immigrants. Now, that might offend some, but get over it. But what of the Europeans who immigrants come from Muslim lands? I fear that they are out of luck because Allah, like Huitzilopochtli, Thor, and Mars, is a god of war. By the way, those other two were related to the moon god. The only god of war still worship, but okay. I fear that they are out of luck because Allah, like Huitzilopochtli, Thor, Mars, is a god of war. The only god of war still worshipped in the 20th century is Allah. Allah is a god of war because the beliefs associated with his worship encourage his devotees to violence and war. What are their beliefs? To begin with, Islam has this belief that a warrior who dies in a jihad to spread or defend Islam goes straight to heaven and be awarded with 72 virgins. This is somewhat similar to the religion of the Vikings, who believe that brave fallen warriors go to Valkyries and feast forever in Odin's hall. By the way, the Vikings worship different variations of the moon god. This belief was firmly planted by Islam's prophet himself, who led a holy war against his enemies and promised paradise to fallen warriors. He even encouraged Islam's first suicide warrior. Find that in Bukhari, Volume 5, Book 59, Numbers 377. It says, on the day of battle of Uhud, a man came to the prophet and said, "Can you tell me where I will be if I should get martyred?" The prophet replied, "In paradise." The man threw away some dates he was carrying in his hand and fought till he was martyred. To encourage jihad, recruiters would quote Quran 9:111. Verily Allah has purchased, and it reads, verily Allah has purchased from the believers themselves and their wealth, in return for heaven being theirs. They fight in the path of Allah and they kill and are killed. How different are the modern Islamist preachers calling for young Muslims to sacrifice their lives to order to kill infidels from the Aztec priests who perform human sacrifices. They are both calling for the blood of innocents. Classical Islam has always divided the world into two parts. Darul Arb, which means abode of war, and Darul Islam, which means abode of peace. It is the duty of Muslims to conquer and subjugate Darul Arb so that Islam prevails. This idea is still alive today. Ayatollah Khomeini sums it up best. Islam makes it incumbent on all adult males, provided they are not disabled and incapacitated, to prepare themselves for the conquest of other countries so that the writ of Islam is obeyed in every country in the world. That everyone bows down to Islam, to Allah. But those who study Islamic holy war will understand why Islam wants to conquer the whole world. Those who know nothing of Islam pretend that Islam counsels against war. Those who say this are witless. These beliefs are what we politely call radical Islamism, or Islamism for short. But the truth is that it's also classical Islam practiced since Islam's earliest days. This warlike ideology was developed in Islam's early years based on the teachings and deeds of Prophet Mohammed. Of course, there will always be Islam apologists who say that not all Muslims would agree with this ideology. That is true. But Muslims regard Prophet Muhammad as the perfect man and role model. In his lifetime, Muhammad waged war, killed his enemies and critics. While his behavior was not unusual for a 7th century ruler, he did start a religion. To repudiate his example would be tantamount to rejecting Islam. Therefore, the Islamists have a better argument. That is why it's so hard for moderates to reform Islam and make it more suited for modern times. That is why about half of the world's conflicts today involves Muslims, even though they account for only 25% of the world's population. These conflicts are in Algeria, Kashmir, the Maluku Islands, Papua New Guinea, Israel, Lebanon, Nigeria, Philippines, Chechnya, Sudan, Thailand, Turkey, Afghanistan, Iraq, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Yemen, etc. And a civil war between Hamas and Fatah. Allah is truly a God of war. It is a pity that the Reformation came out 1 century too early. This provoked a Christian civil war. Otherwise, the Spanish Reconquista might have permanently reconquered North Africa, which the Spaniards claim as theirs because it had once been ruled by Visigothic kings. Instead of fighting each other in religious wars, European states would have a good chance to reconquer the southern Mediterranean, which would have rejoined Western civilization as it was originally part of before the Arab conquests. September 11th will not happen. Throughout man's recorded history, people have worshipped many different gods of war. These gods go by different names, like Mars and Odin. The ancient Egyptians called him Bast, the Celts called him Segamo, and the Slavs worshipped Perun. None of these trouble mankind anymore. Gods of war no longer inspire people to shed human blood, with the only exception is Allah. And that's where we'll pick it up next time as we look at this war horse, this red war horse, and how that ties in with Allah, the God of war. This is just an introduction today. God willing, next Monday we'll continue with this verse as we look in to this red horse, this red war horse, who its rider is, and what the purpose and what it accomplished, and what it's still accomplishing today as a continuing action of what these seals from the one scroll is being delivered on mankind even today. If you're interested, let me know. Play a song.